Hi guys, my name is Cassie. I'm a reference librarian here. Thank you all for being here. And today we have Bill Fox. He is the Director of Technical Assistance and Forge Fund. He has over 15 years of business consulting experience. He served for 11 years as a business consultant and center director for the Small Business and Technology Development Center at the University of Arkansas. During his career at the U of A, Bill worked and consulted with businesses from a wide range of business sectors, from retail to restaurants to healthcare and professional services. He has conducted numerous seminars on a variety of topics, including business planning and strategy, starting a business, marketing, cash flow management, financing options, and more. Bill also taught strategic management as an adjunct faculty at the Sam M. Walton College of Business. Today he will be discussing financial modeling with you all. Here is Bill Fox.
Hi, thanks for that lovely introduction. Who wrote that? I think it was me. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for coming today. And financial modeling, it's kind of a fancy word for, financial projections, okay? Or they also call them pro forma financial statements. And we'll talk about why they're important and why it's important to be able to, construct these things for your business. And I'm pretty informal, as you can probably tell. So if you have any questions, or first of all, this is an overview, okay? I'm not an accountant, but like, Cassidy said, I've been working with small businesses for a number of years. Are there any accountants in here?
We're supposed to be here at 7.
Well, make sure they don't.
We're supposed to be here at 6:05.
Okay, well, make sure they don't come in, because it's the last thing I need is an accountant in here. Seriously, but if I didn't want to insult anybody's intelligence. This is pretty basic stuff, but not to everybody. To some people, it's not basic. So I didn't know, kind of the level you were in terms of financial, business finances and that kind of thing. So I tried to make it, fairly basic, but, kind of detailed too. It's a little dry, so I'll try to make it as interesting as possible. And I love the interaction too. That's one of the neat things about classes like this is, you meet people who are kind of in the same situations. So if you don't mind, could we just sort of introduce ourselves, and if you want to share what kind of business you're wanting to start or have started, that would be great too. If not, that's okay. So you want to start over there.
Oh, my name's Amber Smith, and this is my husband, Kenny. And I am a ceramic artist. I started my business by happenstance, just by working, making things and selling them.
Oh, okay.
And it's been about, like a decade maybe?
Really?
Yeah, but I took some time off, with the COVID changed like my whole world.
Sure, yeah.
Now we're trying to start fresh and like restructure and actually have like a business plan and model. And,
Okay.
yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for coming. I hope you, find something of value here. One of the things I wanted to tell you, this is a lot of information for like an hour and a half or whatever it is. So I gave you all my cards. If you want to meet with me individually, I'll be more than happy to. That would be fun. That's why I enjoy doing this. So if that's something you'd like to do, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'll be happy to. We can talk about anything you want to talk about. Okay. So, ma'am, do you want to go next?
My name is Diane McCullum, and I don't have a business yet, but
Okay.
I'm looking at options.
Okay, great. Well, welcome. It's nice to see you.
I'm Joy. My daughter and I have a vintage clothing business. We've done quite a few years. We've done online and wholesale. Now we are looking into moving that to a physical location.
Okay, terrific. Sir, we're just kind of sharing our names and businesses, if you'd like.
I'm Aaron Collins. I own a welding shop up in Springdale.
Okay.
And, we do manufacturing and repair and do a whole bunch of a lot of different things.
Are you an accountant by any chance?
I do have an MBA.
Darn it. Well, welcome. We're glad you're here. And I was telling the folks too, if there's anything you see that I might be missing or you have questions or comments, I have no ego, okay? I'm too old to have an ego. So if you have something to add, you're more than welcome to do it.
I'm Brenda Borden. I've had like several businesses my whole life. I guess I'm an entrepreneur, but lately it's been e-commerce and designing and manufacturing children's clothing.
Okay.
But we're about to start a family business in real estate investment, so that's why my son-in-law's supposed to be here.
Oh, okay.
So
All right, well, hopefully.
he'll show.
Is he an accountant?
Huh? Yeah.
Richard?
Yeah, so I'm Richard Young. I'm a UI UX designer. The library, like the Center for Innovation, is hosting like a Maker to Market program
Right.
where they've like taught a bunch of technical skills like 3D printing and laser cutting, which has been like a really cool experience. And now this is like the second part where they recommended all these business classes to go to.
Okay.
So yeah, anything you can throw at me, like I'm trying to take a bunch of technical skill sets and actually apply it to business.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I hope this class has some value for each of you in some way, shape, or form. And the agenda, we'll try to follow it. Sometimes I go off on tangents. We'll talk about, we just did the welcome, the introductions. Forge is the organization I represent. We'll talk a little bit about that, not too much. Why financial modeling is important. And then kind of an overview of some of the basic financial statements and tools. We're going to talk a little bit about what a break-even analysis is and why it's important. And then building out the financial model or projections, and then we'll take questions and hopefully I'll have some answers. But as I said during this thing, don't be shy. If there's anything you don't understand or you want to add, whatever knowledge you have to this, that would be more than welcome. So Forge is the organization that I work for right now, and we are a community development finance institution and a SBA microlender. So we're a nonprofit organization, and we try to provide access to capital for small business people in underserved areas or estimated areas. For folks in those communities. Maybe they've had trouble getting capital from traditional sources like a commercial bank. So we kind of try to fill that gap. We were founded in 1988 by a bunch of organic farmers in Madison County. And in 1988, really nobody knew what organic farming was. So when these guys would try to go to a bank and get a loan to expand their farms or buy equipment, the bankers would go, what's organic farming? We don't even understand what that is. So they all got together and kind of formed this lending co-op where they, lent each other money, and then as they paid it back, the fund revolved and they could lend out more money, and then they started lending money to people outside of their little group, and eventually Forge became what it is today. So we serve the entire state of Arkansas. We serve, I think, 18 counties in southwestern Missouri. We serve several parishes in northern Louisiana, and we serve 3 or 4 counties in eastern Oklahoma. 99% of our loans are done in Arkansas, though. So anyway, that's who we are, and I got this fancy title, Director of Technical Assistance. So they just sort of made it up after they hired me. I guess they didn't really know what to do with me. So they said, how about director? Oh yeah, that sounds great. So because I worked at the ASB TDC at the university, that was my area of knowledge, was consulting with small business people and that type of thing. So now I do that, but mostly I advocate for our borrowers and help them get prepared to apply for loans and help them to put together financial projections and just go through the whole process with them to make it as, non-intimidating as we can. Because compared to a bank, we're very non-intimidating, okay? But if you've never applied for a business loan before, it can still be intimidating because we ask you for a bunch of stuff. Tax returns, financial information that's, it's fairly invasive, obviously. So because of that, we try to make it as smooth as we possibly can. So if you're interested in finding out more about what we do fund startups. We usually go with businesses that have been in existence for a while. People come to us if they need to buy equipment, additional inventory, if they need working capital. Some people come because they've used their credit cards to finance their businesses, and with the interest rates their credit cards charge, and cash flow issues that small businesses can have, they get a little bit behind. So the loan, the funds can be used for a number of different purposes, and we try to take everything kind of on a case-by-case basis. We're not a bank, so we don't have shareholders to answer to. We have people to answer to, but we're not there to maximize our profit necessarily. So anyway, that's us. Check our website, give me a call, shoot me an email, whatever. We can talk more about that if you want to. So why are financial? Has anybody here ever done any pro formas, financial projections, or anything like that? Okay. So why are they important? Well, business, as you were saying, Richard, when you came in, you're a design person. You love doing what you do, but the business stuff is like, yeah, and that's really the case with a lot of folks. You can't. I had a business, and it was the same deal with me. But when you think about it, your financial well-being is sort of the foundation of your business. And if you don't know where you stand from a financial perspective on a lot of different levels, you can't make good decisions about your business. You can't make strategic decisions about growth, and things of that nature. And it provides benchmarks. So if you do some projections in terms of monthly sales, let's say, you can use those as benchmarks to measure your actual sales against your projected sales. And if you're not meeting them, that may send up a yellow or red flag as to why. It helps you to set budgets. You can do these projections and kind of do line items like your marketing expenses, your payroll expenses, and I'll show you that later. But those types of things, your insurance expense and other costs, both fixed and variable. And if you don't know what's coming in, it's hard to budget in terms of what's going out, right? So that's another reason, just to help set budgets. And I think it also helps put you in a business mindset, right? So you're running a small business because you love what you do, and you enjoy designing things, and you enjoy welding, and you enjoy serving people, and giving great customer service and that type of thing. But knowing the numbers, and like I said, you don't have to be a CPA, okay? But knowing the numbers and having a basic understanding, I think, is putting yourself in that business mindset is kind of critical. And it is all a mindset, all right? You can be, as you know, as a small business person, you're wearing like dozens of hats anyway, okay? You're the, what they used to call it, the chief cook and bottle washer or whatever. So you're doing everything. But you got to be able to take time, to look at your numbers and understand what they mean. And speaking of accountants, if you have a small business, I think it's imperative that you have an accountant, okay? Because small business taxes, no matter what structure you're working under, LLC, S Corp, sole proprietorship, what have you, it can get complicated, right? And the one agency in Washington that you don't want to get on the bad side of is the IRS, because they just won't let it go, you know, they take it personally for some reason. So have an accountant for the very least for your taxes, but also to kind of guide you through the whole process, you know, of generating statements and, you know, kind of explaining what they mean. Of course, now with all the, you know, software like QuickBooks and things of that nature, you know, it's fairly straightforward and way user-friendly than it used to be. So, and they have tutorials and, you know, all this stuff. So you can really learn a lot. And then there's, you know, YouTube. You can get an MBA on YouTube. I mean, literally. So I wish they had that when I was going to college. Jeez. Wouldn't have taken me 6 years to graduate. And then if you're going to try to obtain outside financing from us, from Forge, or from Arvest, or, you know, another commercial bank, the lender's going to want to see 3 years of these projections, right? Because part of the lending decision is going to be based upon, can you pay the loan back? Preferably from the proceeds of the business, right? They'll look at other sources of income too. But ideally, they want you to pay it back from the proceeds of your business. So the projections help the lender to understand what your business model looks like, how it's going to generate income, how it's going to generate revenue, all right? And look, the projections are based on, you know, good information, the best information you can possibly come up with, but there's still a bit of guesswork in it, all right? So it's not the gospel, but again, it just gives people an idea, most importantly yourselves, as to what your business will look like under different scenarios. And the neat thing about doing these is that if you change one number, you can see how it changes everything else. Like, and we'll talk about that a little later. But that's kind of the cool thing about having these things handy, because if things aren't going as you projected, you can change a number like your gross margin or something like that and see how that affects everything else in your business, okay? So we'll talk a little bit about the financial statements that kind of, you know, make up these pro formas. And these are statements that, you know, you should have a basic understanding of. These are, you know, kind of your building blocks of an accounting system or a reporting system, if you will. So there's the balance sheet, and we'll just take a brief look at it. Excuse me, the income statement, the cash flow statement, and then we'll talk a little bit about the break-even analysis. So the balance sheet is essentially a snapshot of where your business stands financially at a given point in time. Very often it's, you know, at the end of a month or the end of a quarter. And what it shows the reader is how much the business owns, what, you know, assets, what things of value does the business own, and what the business owes in terms of liabilities, loans, accounts payable, you know, things of that nature. And then at the bottom shows the equity that you have in the business. So if you subtract your total liabilities from your total assets, that number is your percentage of ownership, or your ownership in the business, technically, your book value, if you will, all right? So it's the basic accounting equation. Hello there. How are you? Good timing. I was telling, is this your son-in-law? Yeah.
You don't like?
No, accountants.
Not my kind.
No, I do like your kind.
Just joking.
I do like your kind, but I thought, you know, when I don't have your kind in here, I can get away with all kinds of stuff, all right? So anyway, this is a balance sheet. You've probably seen these.
Never heard of it.
So that's what that means, all right? That's the book value of your business. But if somebody comes in to buy your business, yeah, they're going to look at the balance sheet and they're going to look at your book value, but your business is generally worth way more than that, okay? If you're selling it, because there's other factors that you consider. You know, your revenues, your sales, what you take out of the business, and then there's multiples they apply to it and all that stuff. So, but that's sort of a building block of, you know, evaluation in terms of your business. And I always suggest that, and this is like off topic, but I have to tell you that I always used to tell people who came in my office who had businesses or were going to start a business, run your business like you're going to sell it, okay? And that means keeping really good records and making sure that if somebody walks in and makes you an offer or is, says something, hey, you want to sell this thing? That you can go, yeah, let's take a look at, I mean, you're not going to do that right away, obviously. But yeah, you want to see my books? Come on in. No. But my point is, if you run it like you're going to sell it, it's going to be more valuable, okay? The business is going to be more valuable, right? If somebody comes in and they see that you keep, immaculate records and that type of thing, it really makes a big difference, okay? So that's the old balance sheet. And then why is it important? Well, it helps you to evaluate, your tolerance for risk and, possible return if you are looking to invest in machinery or equipment or real estate. Where do you stand from an asset point of view and from a liabilities point of view? It helps you make long-term decisions. It helps you to secure financing, either through equity, somebody wants to invest in your business, or through debt, a loan. And, again, just like all these other things, it kind of helps to prevent problems. If you see that, your cash position isn't what it should be, or what have you, or your accounts receivables are way too high, and you're not collecting in a timely manner, that's going to hurt your cash flow. And from a balance sheet, you can kind of tell these things, right? Are my accounts receivable, over industry average, that type of thing. And then again, with taxes, it makes tax preparation easier too. And there's other reasons. They're fun. There are a million laughs. And the income statement, so that's the other statement, another statement that I think you really need to understand, and it's an operational statement. So this tells you how you're doing, okay? What are your sales? What are your costs of sales or cost of goods? What are your general and selling expenses, your rent, your utilities, your salaries, those types of things. And what is your net income, okay? After all the expenses are taken out, all right? So this thing, and this is a very simple one here, obviously. This thing, is very fluid. It changes every day, literally as you add sales or you pay bills, those types of things. And essentially the formula is revenue minus expenses equals profit. Now there's more complicated ones, obviously. This is just a simple one to illustrate what it might look like. And in terms of projections, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So in terms of projections, we kind of have a fairly good idea of what your expenses are going to be if you do the research. Like, if you do a brick and mortar or something like that, you have a physical location, you can get an idea what the rent's going to be. You can get an idea of what the utilities are going to be, what your business liability insurance expense is going to be, that type of thing. The X factor, obviously, is projecting what you're going to sell. But we'll talk about that later. So again, it helps to improve decision making. It can show you, trends in terms of your sales going up or your costs of goods remaining the same, and is your gross margin fluctuating? So on an income statement, in my mind, one of the most important metrics that you really need to keep an eye on is your gross margin, all right? And there's various benchmarks. Each industry sort of has a unique gross margin, average gross margin, okay? And if you see yours fluctuating, it can mean a number of things. It can mean that you're not charging enough for your product. It can mean that people might be stealing from you if your gross margins start to shrink, okay? And that can mean that people are giving your products away, those types of things. So it's a really important metric to keep your eye on. It shows trends in terms of sales. It helps you get financing your lines of credit. Like I said, when you go into a bank or you come to Forge, we're going to want to see these things. And then a lot of times, when you pay your taxes and you fill out your various forms, you're going to take some information from these statements to do it. And then the cash flow statement, to me, is very, very important, because cash is everything in a business, all right? And you really have to know what your cash position looks like, okay? The income statement, I'll go back, has some things on it that are not cash expenses, all right? For example, see under rent expense, that thing that says depreciation expense, that's not cash going out, all right? Depreciation is your assets are losing value, okay? And you're allowed to take depreciation on your income statement as an expense to lower your tax liability, all right? But it's not cash. Interest expense isn't really an operating expense, okay? You're paying interest on a loan or something like that, but it's not really part of your operational expenses. So those types of things, and amortization is another one. Amortization is the depreciation of your intangible assets, okay? Like your brand, things like that. And you go, why does that lose value? Well, they let you do it because, again, it lowers your income tax rate. It's really not losing value, but they let you do it. So you want your brand to increase in value, really. So on the cash flow statement, so there's 3 activities that are recorded on a cash flow statement. And with the projections, once you fill out one form, they all kind of come together, okay? Well, I'll show you how that works in a second. So this cash flow statement here has the cash at the beginning of the period for this company, Greg's Popsicle Stand. It's net income, that's the cash flow from operating activities. It backs out depreciation and increase in accounts payable, and then increase in accounts receivable. It's kind of complicated. But accounts receivable is money out there that hasn't been collected, right? So if you collect on accounts receivable, then that's cash. So this recognizes cash coming in and cash coming out as it happens. Whereas the other thing is what they call done on an accrual basis, okay? So on an accrual basis, these are accounting terms. The revenue is recognized and the expense is recognized as it happens. So if somebody comes in and purchases something, even if it's a receipt, even if they put a deposit on something and they pay the rest in 90 days, it's still recognized as revenue, all right? And it's the same with with payables, okay? So if you get a bill, that payable is recognized on the income statement, but the cash may not have gone out yet, okay? So that's why somebody's cash position can be so different from what their income statement says. I have people.
No, it's just not.
Am I good?
Yeah, you're good.
You sure?
It's just a memory from me. Funny memory from me. Nothing to do with you.
Okay, all right. Jeez. Is it hot in here?
I'll try to be fun.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I enjoy that.
I'm not laughing at you.
It's really fun.
You said you didn't have any.
I have no ego, none whatsoever. Anyway, so the cash and the net income can look completely different. So I used to do these projections for people, and then they'd come in a year later and they go, well, you said on December 1st I'd have $57,000 in the bank. I have like 25 bucks. I go, well, it's all about the timing. I didn't say on December 1st you'd have $57,000 in the bank. I said under ideal circumstances, if things were paid as they came in and as they went out, this is what you would have. But you don't, and that's perfectly natural, because timing and payables and receivables can really throw this stuff off. So even though you look at your income statement and you go, wow, I'm doing all right, and then you look at your bank account and you go, holy crap, where's all my money? That's pretty common. But cash is everything. I mean, you can't pay, your people, you can't pay your debts, you can't pay your rent, or anything else, really. Your suppliers, it's hugely important to keep a good relationship with your suppliers. If they give you terms, like net 30, whatever it is, and you start not meeting those terms, they'll put you on cash, on like a cash on delivery basis, right? And that can be really tough, because if you don't have the cash, you're not going to have the stuff to sell. So if you get nothing else out of this thing, know how much cash you have, all right? And manage it. It's really hard because of the timing, because of all the intricacies of receivables and pay. It's really hard to manage cash, all right? It's challenging, but you got to do the best you can. That's what I mean by protecting those business relationships. And then it also helps you to, if you're thinking strategically, and you're in a good cash position, is this a good time to grow without bringing on more debt or bringing in additional investment? Okay, because debt, obviously you're going to have a payment every month. But if you bring in outside investors, that's not all it's cracked up to be sometimes either, because you're diluting your ownership in the business, right? All of a sudden, this business that you brought up from nothing and is your baby, somebody else is coming in and changing its diapers and stuff, and you're going, wait a minute, I only own 30% now? What happened? And it's hard to find people who are like-minded that you can share this thing with. It really is, all right? And, and you see things like Shark Tank and all this. It's entertaining, I'll give it that, but it's not, it's not, I don't know. I have a problem with Shark Tank for some reason. It's reality TV, okay? People do, succeed on that program, I suppose, and create businesses and whatnot. But it's not real life, all right? So finding somebody, and they talk about angel investors, but usually an angel investor wants 40% of your business, right? That's not like angelic, is it? Angels don't do that. Not the angels I know, anyway. So just be careful is all I'm saying, and vet these options as completely as you can. And this is the difference between a cash flow statement and an income statement, which I just kind of talked about. Cash flow is just cash in and cash out. Income statement has some non-cash items that will reduce your tax liability when that time comes. So this is sort of how it all comes together, all right? The revenues, the income statement feeds into your cash flow statement. The cash flow statement feeds into your balance sheet. And if you have a good template, like a projections template, and there's a lot of good ones out there, it can kind of do all this figuring for you, okay? So find a good one. You may have to pay a little for it. The ASB TDC up at the university, they'll do projections for you. They have a really good template, and I still use it, as a matter. Don't tell them that. But I still use it, in my job at Forge, because it's good. It works, right? So this just kind of shows the relationship, right, between all these different statements. They don't stand alone. They're all related. Yeah.
What was that acronym?
Oh, the ASB TDC. It stands for Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center. And their office is over on Block Avenue. When I worked there, we were on campus, but they decided to move off campus. And they have free business consulting. They can help you with market research. They can help you with these projections and business plans and the marketing, those types of things. So now we come to another part of the pro forma deal is the break-even analysis. And what this shows you is at what level of sales will your revenues cover your costs, okay? How much of, item X do I have to sell in order to break even, and then what do I have to sell to make a profit? And there's two ways of doing it. You can do it, via dollar amount, like I have to sell $50,000 worth of whatever, or you can do it by units. I have to sell, 65,000 units, that type of thing. One of the most important things you have to do, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, is come up with, obviously, prices for your goods, right? I mean, you can't do any of this stuff without that. So you have to determine what you're going to sell your goods for, or your products for, okay? And that all kind of feeds in, to the break-even analysis. So here's a calculation, and and there'll be like a quiz after this, so I expect you to, I don't even know how to do this. This is for the number of units. So it's your fixed costs. Now your fixed costs are things you're going to have to pay regardless of whether or not you sell anything, okay? Like, you're going to have to pay your rent, your utilities, your people, what have you, regardless of whether you sell 1 unit or 1,000 units, right? And then your selling price, which you will determine based on some really interesting pricing models, minus the variable costs. What's a variable cost? Well, it's pretty much what it says. It's costs that vary with your level of sales, all right? Your cost of goods, your like credit card fees, right? So if you take credit cards or debit cards, they charge you, whatever it is, 2.9%. Obviously, that expense is going to go up if you sell more stuff, and it's going to go down if you sell less stuff. So that's sort of an example of, a variable cost. It could be, labor, direct labor could be a variable cost. When I talk about direct labor, it means, what did it cost you in labor to produce an item? Now, very often, large manufacturing companies look at that as a variable cost, or even sometimes, restaurants, or certainly like engineering firms and architecture firms and people like that look at direct labor as a variable cost. But that's, it's a fairly simple calculation. So let's say your fixed costs are $60,000 per period, let's say a month. And then you divide that, your selling price per unit is $2, your variable cost per unit is 80 cents. Subtract that, you get $1.20 divided by, 60,000 divided by $1.20. You'd have to sell 50,000 units of whatever it is in order to break even. And those are the other calculations too. If you notice, if you change, like I was saying before, you bring down your fixed cost by $10,000, keeping the same variable costs and price, you only have to sell a little less than 42,000 units to break even. And by the same token, if your fixed cost remains $60,000, but you drop your variable cost by 20 cents a unit, then you only have to sell a little less than 43,000 units to break even. So as you can see, changing one number can make a big difference, even by a little, especially when you're talking about volume like this. But even if you're not, it can still have a pretty big effect. And then if you're doing the break-even calculation using sales dollars, it's a slightly different formula. But as you can see, the results when changed, when the numbers are changed and the percentages are changed, can make a fairly significant difference in the number of, in the dollar amount that you need to generate to break even, okay? This is a really important tool, I think. Even when you're in business, especially, okay? Keeping on top of this, I think is, really, really important. And again, this is where, a good accountant can come in. Or even, it doesn't have to be necessarily a CPA, somebody who's strong in bookkeeping or that type of thing can generate these reports, and so can a lot of different software programs. The key is to understand it. So what do you need to get started? Okay. We know all that stuff now. We know all what these statements are and why they're important and all that stuff. Now you want to actually start doing it, all right? So again, pick out a good program, okay? I mean, if you're a wizard at Excel, you can create your own. Are you a wizard? Okay, good. Or pay somebody to do it, perhaps. But there's a lot of great products out there in terms of these types of spreadsheets that can help you build out these projections. So the first thing you really want to do when you're starting to build these things out is come up with your startup costs. How much is it going to cost you to open your doors, if you will, okay? And that will include any kind of equipment you need if you're making a product or what have you. And then office equipment, furnishings for your office, materials to make the product, inventory to sell, organizational expenses like, let's say you want to form an LLC or an S Corp and you hire a lawyer to do it. You don't have to, but it's probably a good idea. How much is that going to cost? Business licenses and stuff like that. And if you're starting a business that requires special licensure or special certification, you have to factor those costs into this too. And then what kind of deposits are you going to have to pay as far as rent, utilities, insurance, that type of thing. If you're going to rent a space to house your business, you'll probably need a build out. And how much is that going to cost you? Very often, a landlord will assist with paying for the build out, but may add it back into the lease at the end of the lease. So make sure, and you shouldn't have to pay the entire cost of a build out of a lease space either, all right? So there's a lot of negotiation that goes on. Another piece of advice about leases. Don't sign anything until, so yeah, you need an accountant, you need a good, but you also need a lawyer, all right? So don't sign anything without showing this thing to a lawyer, because most of them are fairly standard, and usually people aren't trying to get one over on you, but you just have to know what you're responsible for and what they're responsible for, because in many commercial leases aren't really like residential leases. They're completely different, and I found that out kind of the hard way because I didn't take my own advice. This was a long time ago. I didn't know anything then. I was a kid. I was only like 40. So 35 maybe. So anyway, we started a business. We signed a commercial lease. I didn't have a lawyer look at it. And I thought, well, if something goes wrong with the bathroom or the air conditioner, they fix it. We're good. No, wrong. My air conditioner went out, and the landlord comes over and he goes, when are you going to fix that thing? I go, I thought you fixed it. He goes, no, I don't fix it. Read the lease. So I got an estimate. It was like $5,000 or something. This was in 1996. And I said, there's no way I can do this, right? So he was nice enough to help me. He split the cost with me. Because at the end of the day, he's going to have a new freaking air conditioner, okay? But I'm going to have to pay for it? I mean, it's not really fair, but that's the way it is, all right? So if you get a nice landlord like that, be thankful. But read the lease and have a lawyer look at it. And if there's anything that he or she or you don't like about it, hopefully you can negotiate it out, all right? So, and then, how much money are you going to have employees before you open, help you get the thing ready or whatever? How much is it going to, you're going to have to pay them. And you're probably going to have to develop some kind of website or maybe an e-commerce platform, which is going to cost you something, unless you can do it yourself. And then you'll have to have a little cash in case things come up that you don't expect, and they always do. They say expect the unexpected, which doesn't really make sense because if it's unexpected, you can't expect. But but you know what they mean. And trust me, there's always going to be things that you don't expect that are going to pop up, that it's going to cost a lot of money, okay? No matter how diligent you are in determining how much it's going to start to cost to start your business, invariably there are things that you just can't know about that will come up and blindside you, okay? Not all the time, but I'd say 3/4 of the time. So you got to have some working capital. You got to have some cash to protect yourself against that, all right? And then you need a big stapler, and those things are expensive. So you total all this up. You're going to go, okay, I need $150,000 to start this thing. Great. Where am I going to get it? All right. So and that $150,000 serves as your initial balance sheet, really. Most of those items on there are assets, okay? As you go back to the balance sheet, your assets, your equipment, your office equipment, your inventory, that's an asset. The build out is an asset. Your leasehold improvements are assets. Cash is an asset too. And then, any kind of, liabilities, like rent payable and things like that, insurance payable, those types of things. Prepaid insurance, prepaid rent, all the prepaids are assets. So you can see where the start of your balance sheet comes from this. Sorry. So where do you get the money to start a business? Most people, first of all, I don't recommend borrowing large sums of money to start a business. It's too risky. And you really have to assess your life, where you are in life. This is a big decision. It's huge. It affects every part of your life. It affects not only your financial life, your relationships, your emotions, your level of stress, and everything else. People used to say, I used to ask people, why do you want to start your own business? And they go, I want to be my own boss and spend more time with my family and all this stuff. I go, good luck with that. Because your family's not going to want to spend any time with you because you're going to be totally stressed out all the time, right? So, so it's something that you never leave. I mean, if you have a job and you work, people take work home with them, and I get that. But you leave the office or your home office or your shop and you go home. And you hang out with your family and friends or whatever, watch some Netflix, and you go to bed and you wake up and you do it again. If you have your own business, you don't really ever leave it. Even if you leave the physical location, it's still up here because you're wondering, God, rent's due tomorrow. Do I have to call what's his name again and see if we can put it off for a few days? Cash flow's a little rough this month, and Cindy needs another day off. We just gave her a week off. What do we get? So there's always something to think about, is what I'm saying. All right, and you know that, and other people who have had businesses know that too. So again, I don't necessarily recommend taking out a big loan to start a business. If you have an existing business and you're looking to expand and you're looking to add capacity or what have you, add jobs, add value. Okay, we talked about selling a business. If this funding, be it debt funding, will add value to your business, will make it more valuable in the long run, in that if somebody comes to sell it, you're going to make money, and there's no sure things, okay? But if you've been in business for a while, you kind of know the cycles, you know the competition, you know the market, you've been strategic about it, then to me that's the time to maybe borrow money, okay? If it adds value to the business, right? And again, there's no guarantees. A lot of people use their credit cards to start businesses, and again, if you're careful, and you don't let them get out of hand with the interest and stuff, a lot of people do it. I mean, they just do. But I'd be careful with that too. Friends and family is a big one. If you want to keep your friends and you have a good relationship with your family, don't screw it up. And I've seen it. I've seen it happen, all right? And it's incredibly unfortunate, incredibly sad. Because money, it just changes the nature of a relationship. It just does. And I have seen sisters who go into business together. There's no operating agreement. There's nothing in writing. And I go, you should have, it's not that you don't trust each other. It's just, it's good business. No, we're a sister, And one of the sisters absconded with all the inventory in their shop and this type of thing and ran up bills on their credit cards and all this. And, was in Aruba somewhere. They were, they'll never find her. We don't have an extradition treaty with them or whatever. So it was a real mess. And they never spoke again, right? And I know that's an extreme example, but you'd be surprised at how often things like that do happen, And if you're going into business with your spouse, I'm picking on you. It can work. It works, or not, or may not work. But you have to understand that the relationship. I mean, it's got to be strong from the outset, right? But that it's going to change, right? And the fact that you're sitting and having dinner and you're talking about the business, and you have to pull back sometimes, I guess is what I'm saying, if possible, right? Because your marriage, your relationships are way more important than this, in my opinion, anyway. And then, we talked about outside investors a little earlier. It's hard to find outside investors to invest in a small business. It does happen, but again, no matter what you do in terms of how you find it, everything, friends and family, what have you, get everything in writing. Just get everything in writing. Everything needs to be documented, right? Before any money changes hands. So we did the startup costs. You know how much you're going to need. You've decided you have enough in savings to start the business without borrowing any money, which is great. And a lot of people use, they're like 401ks and stuff. They cash them in, they take the penalties, they use those to finance. I'm not a big fan of that either. You're going, what are you a fan of? Not sure. Trying to do it yourself, if you can, or partnerships can work too. Again, and they work all the time. All right, I know I'm being kind of fatalistic here, but I've just seen too many rotten things happen. But they can work. It's just a matter of having everything laid out and legal-like. All right. So anyway, back to the projections. We have a better idea in terms of how to estimate our recurring monthly expenses. We know ballpark what our payroll is going to be. We know what do you want to take out of the business, all right? That's kind of important too. I mean, why have a business if you're not going to derive any economic benefit from it, all right? And if, I mean, really, you want to make a living doing what you love to do. And if you're not making a living doing what you love to do and you're just throwing money at it, it's more like a hobby. It's really not a business. So make sure when you do these projections that you build in a salary for yourself or an owner's draw or whatever. And maybe you can't take anything out of it for the first few months. That's not unusual at all. But again, make sure you have money in abeyance that will enable you to pay your bills while the thing's building up. So you kind of have an idea what these things are going to cost you. Now, marketing is kind of a wild card because people ask me, what's a good amount to spend on marketing? I mean, it depends. Initially, you want to spend a lot more probably than you would maybe after a year or two once your business has established a footprint. But initially, you have to get the word out. And nowadays, though, marketing with social media and, those types of things is a lot more effective because it's way more personal. And even though it's free monetarily, it does take a lot of time, right? So there's human capital involved. So a lot of businesses use social media to and they get amazing results from it, right? So, but marketing is super important. People have to know who you are, what you're selling, how what you're selling is going to solve a problem that they're having in the marketplace. That's what businesses do. All right, they solve problems. Okay, and even if you're designing like a cool coffee mug or something, what problem does that solve? Well, maybe somebody wants to add a new type of coffee mug to their coffee mug collection. Their coffee mug game is suffering for whatever reason, okay, and that's a problem. So they want a new coffee mug. I know it's kind of silly, but when I say problem, I don't necessarily mean hemorrhoids and stuff like that. I mean, it could be anything. It could be my golf swing sucks, so I want to get a new fangled putter or what have you to help solve that problem. Maybe my self-esteem is a little low, okay, so I'm going to go buy a really expensive pair of shoes or whatever. That's a problem. And really expensive shoes solve that problem, for the consumer. So when you're thinking about your business, one of the first things you got to ask yourself is, what problem am I solving here that isn't being addressed adequately in the marketplace? Okay, it's a big question, but I think it helps to focus your thinking a little bit. So these are your estimates. All of these costs, you can kind of get a ballpark figure. You can get quotes on insurance and utilities, and you're going to know what your rent is. Build in a miscellaneous line because, like I said, with the startup costs, there's going to be stuff you don't expect. While when you're operating, there's going to be stuff you don't expect that you're going to have to pay for. So all this is great, but the X factor is in any pro forma or projection or financial model is how much am I going to sell? Because that, affects everything, obviously. And that's the hardest part because it's, market driven, right? So you try to get as much research as, the ASB/TDC does a great job with market research, okay? They can break down different areas in terms of demographics, income, age, that type of thing. And they can kind of tell you who's doing what in certain areas as far as your competition is concerned. So you can get an idea. People think, well, everybody will want my product, right, or my service. But that's usually not the case, unless it's, food or something. Not everybody. So if you go into it thinking that, then you're not going to get anybody to buy your product or service. So you have to really figure out who your target market is, and appeal to them. And that's hard. I mean, it takes marketing's a lot of trial and error. It just is. You do something, and usually it's the thing that you don't expect to work that ends up working. And the only way to listen with the business, as with almost anything else, experience is the best teacher. I mean, somebody like me can talk till they're blue in the face about what you should and shouldn't do and all this stuff. But until you start doing it, you don't really, it just doesn't seem real. But as soon as you start doing it, then it seems pretty real. And most people don't go, oh yeah, that Bill guy told me this would happen. No, because I couldn't. There's no way I could tell him what would happen, all right? Under the best of circumstances, this is what could happen. It's not what might, not what will happen necessarily, all right? So in order to determine what you're gonna, what your sales are gonna be, obviously you have to determine how much you're gonna charge for your product or service. And there's several ways to do that. And usually, people say, well, if I have a retail store, how much should I mark up my products? They ask that. And there's a thing called keystoning, which is essentially doubling the wholesale price of an item, and that's the retail price of an item. And you might add, extra for, shipping or what have you, okay? And again, use market data to determine how many units you think you can sell in a given month, and account for seasonality, because every month is different, obviously. And then we'll take a look at a couple of pricing models here too. But it's very important to determine how much it's going to cost you to produce one unit of your product or a service. It's even harder to cost services, all right, because there's a lot of intangibles. Usually you go sort of a market-based approach, when you're pricing services and things like that. You don't want to, for example, like something like welding or something, I would imagine. How do you, I'm curious, I don't mean to put you on the spot or anything, but how do you set your prices? You charge by the hour?
Yeah, we do hourly charges, and then I just take my general hourly payroll for the group or team that's going out and double it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's your markup. That's your, okay. Interesting. So that's a good real life lesson right there. So how do you determine what you're going to charge for this product or service? So we're just going to talk about a couple of different pricing models. There's one called a value-based pricing model. And you know the old saying, well, somebody's only worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it? That's sort of what this is. I use Starbucks as an example, Apple, iPhones and whatnot. Does it cost them, how much does it cost to make an iPhone? Not, if you double it, it's not going to cost $1,000, all right? It doesn't cost that much to make an iPhone. It's the perceived value. Starbucks, I went to Starbucks today, and I ordered this latte thing, right? And it's it's like this big, and it's got a bunch of liquid in it. And it was $5.75, and I gladly paid it, right? And I'm not sure why, exactly. What problem were they solving for me? I needed caffeine, okay, but I could have got cheaper caffeine somewhere else. I think it was the cup, the experience, the brand. That's what I was buying. I didn't even go inside. It was the drive-through, right? Why am I doing $5.75? And it was gone in like 10 minutes, But people, and so when they started up Starbucks, I don't think most people thought, that there's a big market for $5 cups of coffee out there. I think they made the market themselves, because they weren't selling coffee, they were selling, their brand, the experience, the ambient, whatever you want to call it. All right, their coffee isn't all that great, but when people walk down the street, when the Starbucks first started up, and you'd see a man or woman walking down the street with that cup with the mermaid on it, you go, wow, this person must be doing okay. At least I thought that. I'm very insecure. But but it's true, okay? It's all up here. So and then Louis, the same thing. It doesn't take a $1,000 handbag. I'm sure it doesn't cost $500 to make it, right? So they price it according to the value that their customers are going to perceive, and this is going to solve a problem for them somehow, some way. And they've built incredible loyalty through doing this, all right? And Starbucks has actually created an industry. People say, well, I don't want Starbucks moving in here because they're going to run out all the little mom and pop coffee shops. They've actually, it's just the opposite, all right? There's like 1 million mom and pop coffee shops now that wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for them. So, whatever it is. So, but it works, this value-based pricing, it really works best for companies like this that offer a particular or unique product or service, or that's perceived as unique or particular. Pricing is very psychological, all right? And we've all seen it. Walmart, purposely price the very odd numbers, okay? Like rollback, 1097. Why is it 1097? Because having that number there makes you think that it's been reduced way more than if they put it at 1099. I mean, seriously. So it's all it's all very psychological. It really is, and we continue to fall for it for some reason, even though we know better. It's fun. So what are the advantages of it? Well, you can command obviously a higher price point, right? And many of the things you're talking about here in designs and whatnot, you can pretty much charge whatever you want for those things, you know? There might be some trial and error involved, but if you're making something unique that nobody else makes, you know, you can charge whatever you know, within reason, whatever you want for it. It increases your brand value, yes, as we, again, it helps promote loyalty. And then it helps you to focus outward instead of inward. You know, a lot of times small business people, they're very myopic in terms of, you know, the way they look at their business. They don't necessarily have time to look at it from a customer's point of view. And this type of pricing kind of helps you look at it from that value perspective, right? It's really important, in addition to all the other hats you wear as a small business person, to once in a while put on your like consumer hat, because we're all consumers, right? And just ask yourself a question regarding your own business. Would I buy from me? Okay? It's a very simple question, but it's a very important question. I owned a retail store, you know, way back in the 90s. It seems so long ago. Before, you know, the internet and all that. Well, people weren't using it to buy stuff yet. Anyway, Al Gore hadn't invented it really fully. So we had this retail store, and this was in Florida, in South Florida, where I used to live. And every now and then I would go out and I would walk around the shopping center and I would look at my store and ask myself, would I shop there? And if I said no, there would be, you know, discussions as to why with my folks. And it really helped. It really did. It just took you out of it because you're worried about everything. But, you know, you got to worry about your customer first and foremost. Because if you don't have any of those, you don't have a business, obviously. And I tell people the best way to raise money is to sell more stuff. I mean, really, when you think about it. It sounds easy, it sounds kind of stupid, but it's true. You know, sell as much, the whole point of it is to sell as much stuff as you can and keep your expenses as low as you can without sacrificing quality and service. It's a really tough thing to do. And I admire anybody who runs a business or is thinking about it, because not many people can do it. So, you know, it's a lot harder than it sounds. There's some disadvantages, obviously. It's not an exact science. I mean, what is? The price is harder to set. You know, there may be competition moving in that kind of undercuts you, but is going after the same customer, but has a higher value perception among that customer for whatever reason. And like I said a minute ago, it can require some trial and error and may require some market and industry research as well. Now, the cost plus pricing model is used by a lot of retailers and companies like, you know, Walmart and Target, and they essentially mark up the wholesale price by adding a fixed percentage to it. So like I said before, you know, retail traditionally, they keystone the wholesale price and double it. So if you buy if you buy something for $5, you sell it for, you know, $5.95 or whatever. So retail companies like clothing, grocery stores, department stores, and they all have slightly different margins, slightly different markups, but generally that's the case. And this one's a lot easier because, you know, it's based on the number, all right? So, and this will yield the gross margin we talked about. So a lot of people think, well, if you mark it up by 50%, that means your gross margin is 50%. That's not true. It's actually, it's 33%. If you mark something up 100%, if you have a $10 item that you buy wholesale, you mark it up by 50%, that's a $15 selling price, minus the $10, you get a $5 gross profit per unit, or 33%. If you mark it up, if you keystone it and mark it up 100%, it'll yield a 50% gross margin. And that's kind of where you want to be. And like I said, every industry is different. I mean, restaurants are different than retail stores as far as margins are concerned. So you want to access that information while you're determining how much you're going to charge for your good or service. And once, again, this is the easiest cost pricing method you can use, really. It's easy to understand, and it requires very little research. The disadvantage, it doesn't always correlate to customer value. Okay, so people have this perception of price being analogous with value, and that's not always the case in a lot of people's mind. My daughter, whenever we buy anything like, what's the Walmart brand that they sell there? For great value, yeah. She goes, no, this isn't as good as the. I said, it's made in the same factory. You do understand that, okay? Walmart doesn't have their own factories. Their great value Oreos are made in the same factory that regular Oreos are made in. They may not put quite as much stuff in them, though. I have noticed that. Yeah. So, but that value perception, right? You're paying less. This can't be as good, right? We all have that.
It took a while. We went to Spain, and buying a $3 bottle of wine, we were like, this is going to be horrible, but it was the best wine we had.
It's funny you should say that, because I lived in England for a while, and to get a box of Oreos there, you'd have to go to this department store called Harrods, okay? It's like a hugely upscale department store in London, and they'd be like £15 for a box of Oreos, which is like $20, and this was
like a cereal store.
Yeah.
Like a cereal store,
Yeah.
and all they sold were American goods.
Right.
And it was just American cereal, basically.
Yeah.
And everything was
it was
at least 20 euros.
nuts.
I was I have no idea what's happening right now.
But see, people over in Europe, they value our stuff more than we do. And it's the reverse is true too. Whenever we see something, German engineered or whatever, we go, this must be better than our stuff, right? The Germans, they know how to make razors and fans and blenders and stuff like that. And so we buy them, and then you look at where it's made in China, So. But it has a German name on it. So anyway, but it's all up here. That's the really interesting thing. It's all up here. And they know that, all right? They do tons, they spend millions and millions of dollars on research to determine why people buy what they buy and where to place it and, that type of thing. It's really amazing, They got us pegged pretty well. It's kind of scary. So anyway, this cost plus pricing, it doesn't necessarily take into account the competition. So, a lot of people, when they start out their small business, they try to undercut everybody else on the price, right? We're going to charge less than those guys down the street, right? I don't think that's not sustainable, really. Because I think part of it is because we live in the land of Walmart, and we have that discount kind of mentality. But it's not just here, it's pretty much everywhere. I'm going to corner the market by selling my thing, 5 cents less. Again, it's not sustainable because it's much harder. And the economy will dictate, the market will dictate if you have to raise your prices or not. But trying to undercut people is.
In my experience, you either have to do it better or do it cheaper, and not compete with Walmart and Target. You have to do something that they can't do.
Exactly. You gotta find a niche that they're not really addressing adequately. You can't compete with them. It's impossible. But But even if you know, it wasn't for them to compete on price, it depends on the item, you know, and the service and things like that. But it's usually not a great strategy. So, okay, so we talked about all that stuff, and you're going, well, what do these things look like? So this is a 12-month projected income statement that I did for a client of ours. And as you can see, the top line are the sales revenue. Okay, this is how much this is for a coffee shop, I believe. So that's how much she's going to sell month by month, that top line. That's how much it's going to cost her to produce those sales. You know, the ingredients for the coffee, the direct labor, whatever food she has, you know, pastries and stuff like that. And then her gross profit is what she's going to make before all her general and administrative expenses come out. Okay? So as you can see, the other line items, the wages, payroll taxes, supplies, maintenance, ad and promotion, marketing, office expense, travel, accounting and legal, telephone, internet, rent, utilities, all of those things come out. She took out a loan. Her interest payment on one of them is $290 a month. As you can see, it goes down after the first month. Same with loan number 2. And then there's that depreciation thing. So she has equipment that's going to depreciate at $843 per month for 5 years. So she's allowed to take that as an expense. And because of that, it lowers her bottom line. So her net profit, and you know, as you can see, in a few months, her net profit is negative. But if you take out that depreciation, it's actually positive. So her sales, you know, $78,000. I mean, it's a very small shop. And then her bottom line here, and coffee is a very high margin item. Okay, so but you still have to sell a lot of coffee to make, you know, $7,700. So, do you want to put in all this effort to make $7,700? I don't know, but you know, she does. So, obviously, she hopes it grows over the years to a place where she can, you know, make a living doing it. But you know, this just gives you an example of why you should do these things. Because when you see it, it's one thing to think about it, but when you actually see the numbers, you go, wow, that's all I'm going to make? Yeesh, maybe I ought to keep my job, you know? So I mean, it's something to think about. You know, you want to make money. And people will come to me, well, I don't want to be a millionaire or anything. I go, good, because you're not going to be, okay? They said, you know, you can make a comfortable living, but you got to sell lots of stuff. I mean, if she sold twice as much coffee, she'd make a halfway decent living, right? But look, this is where the risk comes in, okay? You just never know until you do it. And that's one of the characteristics of an entrepreneur, is they're willing to take risks. And you know, God bless y'all. I've done it. I won't do it again. But it was a great experience. I learned so much, and good and bad. You know, I guess I think I'm focusing too much on the negative. It can be an incredible experience when somebody buys what you're selling. Somebody who can buy, you know, something from somebody else is buying what you're selling because they like what you're selling better than they like what somebody else is selling. That's a pretty cool feeling. It really is. It's just getting enough of those people to do it, you know. And that's the tricky part, and that's where marketing comes in. I mean, really, every company that's, you know, marketing is usually the first place people cut, you know, when things aren't going great. And it's really the first place you should increase, you know, in a lot of cases. You have to kind of evaluate and change with the times. You know, out of COVID, which was obviously horrible for so many people, but businesses learned a lot about how to do business on a completely different way, in a completely different level, using a completely different model. And many of them are still using those models now. and finding them to be very profitable, something they wouldn't have tried had it not been for the pandemic. It's a shame that it took something that awful to, you know, to do that, but, you know, as with a lot of things, something good can come out of it. So, you know, you just got to be aware of what's going on around you and try to be proactive rather than reactive when you're running a business. So that's pretty much all I have. I hope you got something out of this thing. And like I said, I'd be happy, you know, if you want to talk one-on-one sometime, I'd be happy to do that. You know, sometimes it just helps to talk about stuff. You know, it doesn't even have to be like all that specific. It just helps to talk about your idea, maybe get some validation, or because I've been doing this a while, you know, I've seen a lot of different business ideas come down the pike and whatnot, and I have a fairly good feeling of what, you know, what's what, all right? Do I screw up? Yeah. I mean, all the time. A lot of the businesses that I thought were never going to make it are wildly successful. And vice versa. You can't miss with this thing. And then, you know, they're out of business in 3 months. So there's just no, you know, there's no template, all right? Because there's so many variables. And a lot of it's with you, it's with the entrepreneur. We're all different. And we all look at the world differently. And we all have different, you know, sets of values and those types of things, which drive us and you know, in essence, drives whatever we do. It drives us at work, and it drives us in our business too. So, you know, good luck to everybody. And if I can be of any help down the road, just let me know. Be happy to. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.